Hi everybody, and welcome to today's virtual tutorial. So what I thought I'd do is show you how you can begin a art journaling page spread in your art journal. And I thought I would just give you some ideas on how you can begin the process and then develop it as you start sort of putting different colours down onto the page, and then sort of turn it into various different things. Okay, so it's going to be quite spontaneous, but I hope that you find it helpful. So the first thing obviously you're going to need is your art journal, and I've got a couple of different mediums I thought would be really interesting to use. I have some oil pastels here and some marker pens. So the first thing obviously is just to find your pages, and then to get to the various different colours you have. Now obviously if you want to use specific ones, that's absolutely fine. So I'm going to pick sort of some warm-ish tones. Okay, so these are the colours that I'm going to choose. So obviously warm tones being your yellows, oranges, reds, but I've also got two on the cooler colour spectrum in terms of blues and some purple. Okay, and then obviously I'm going to probably use similar colours to that in my oil pastel set. Okay, so I've got quite a large but basic set here of oil pastels. And basically what we're going to do to start with is just start experimenting with colour. So if you have something specific in mind, that's absolutely fine, but if you don't, that's perfectly fine as well. Okay, so keeping in mind the colours that you've chosen, if you have different colours to me, that's absolutely fine. All we're going to start doing is just picking any colour and just start making some various different marks on the page. Now I don't have anything in mind for this, I'm just creating, and obviously I will be leaving some gaps here and there as well for the journaling aspect of this, and that's where the pens will come in very, very handy. Now the good thing with oil pastel is obviously you can layer it really, really nicely. Okay, so I'm just going to keep building this up. And as you start creating, what you might find is that it starts to resemble certain things. And when you think, oh, that looks like such and such, or that reminds me of so and so, when you start having those thoughts, that's when you can start actually turning it into something specific. So looking at this at the moment, it's making me think of flowers. So now I've got that idea in my head, I'm going to start thinking, actually, maybe I can make this look a bit more floral. Okay, so this is a really, really good way of just experimenting and starting to sort of get some ideas. And it's quite a nice sort of natural sort of process, because obviously you're creating just by whatever happens to come into your head when you see all the different colours you're using and any marks you're making, if there's any patterns, if there's some specific shapes. So it's quite an organic process, which I quite like. You don't have to be particularly neat with it or specific or anything like that. I'm going to start going in with some of my marker pens now. And I'm just going to start putting in some words, and also using the pens just to continue this page. There's no right and wrong in this, so you can absolutely create something new and unique to you, which is the brilliant thing about this process. When you start filling the page, that's when you start getting, I'm just going to zoom that out a little bit so you can see it a little clearer, there we go. That's when you start getting these sort of ideas on, you know, how something appears to you and what it resembles. It might be that you particularly like flowers, and that just happens to have come to you in the marks you make. But obviously it doesn't have to be anything flower or floral based, it can be anything that you like. I think I'm going to move to a slightly darker pen. Don't worry about the style of text that you write in, whether you have sort of quite curly fancy handwriting, or if you like to use sort of block lettering, it's absolutely fine. The whole point of this is just to start creating and doing something that's unique to you. So when you start creating certain patterns, it's always good to think about what that makes you think of. So for me, seeing flowers is making me think of spring and summertime, so that's what I'm going to start writing about. And you don't have to sort of think too much about it, it's just really about letting things flow, letting ideas, words, phrases, or even songs just come to mind as you begin writing. Okay, and then you can just start to put various different words down. So now these little sort of swirls I'm doing are sort of making me think of, you know, sort of the wind and the rain from the winter time, and I'm starting to put that into parts of the page that have these cooler tones. So always keep in mind where colours and words have some sort of a connection. So obviously your cooler tones might have a particular thing in mind for you, like winter or rain or anything like that. Okay, so this then starts to have a slightly different feel to it. The other thing that you can do, obviously if you're using oil pastels and pens as I am, is you can layer and use the marker pens on top of the oil pastel, which is quite nice. Oil pastel, obviously because of its oily, waxy quality, sometimes can be quite difficult to work on top of with any other medium, but marker pens work quite well for that, from what I've experienced, just depending on what type of pen you're using. Obviously if you're using something like biro, it's a lot finer, it's sort of different type of ink, so that might have a different reaction, but obviously the main thing that I would normally suggest is to keep layering with oil pastel and try not to put too many other mediums on top of it, because it has that oily, waxy texture, and it will impact on your pens eventually. So you can do sort of little bits and pieces, but obviously you don't want your pens to suddenly stop working. Okay, so it's making me sort of think of combination now of sort of flowers, spring, summer, but also the winter and the rain. So I'm going to have that mixture now of different colours, different tones, and that's sort of bringing everything alive a little bit. Moving back to a warmer tone pen here, I've got a red, so I'm going to put that over here. And obviously it's worth thinking about what colours you're using when you're writing about something in particular. So here where I'm sort of talking a little bit about winter time, I'm using those cool tones, and here I'm talking about the summer, so I'm using a warmer tone, so I'm using a red pen. So that's always worth considering as well. It's just little ideas like that that can really make a difference. And you just want that sort of mixture of colour. There's some more sort of heat rays here. And then I will switch back to a cooler pen and do some raindrops. So again, you've got this nice mixture now of different colours denoting different things, different memories, different thoughts. And it's just starting to sort of develop a little bit more now. And you can keep going with this as much as you want. You can incorporate other things if you have any sort of stampers or anything at all. You can really incorporate lots of different things. You can add different colours. Some people like to do some collage as well. Okay, so I'm just going to build up some of these yellows a little bit more on these flowers. And it's always worth having a sort of step back from it every so often, just so you can see how it's developing. It helps bring the perspective back as well, so that you can see if there's any areas that you need to build more on. Or anything which needs a little bit more. Sometimes you can create something and then it can get a bit lost when you add something else to it, so it's always worth looking at it again and thinking, is that sort of getting hidden by something else I've added? Do I need to bring it back out? Okay, so I'm just putting some little blobs of yellow around, just to denote the sun here and there, and also it helps to draw the eye all across the page spread, because that's what you want. Sometimes if you're doing a page spread, you want someone to look at a particular area, so you might have some really bright colours or really rich tones of colour, and that will automatically draw the eye somewhere. So if you're creating a piece of artwork, for example, that's usually what artists think of. They're thinking about where the viewer's eye is going to be. And if they want to draw your attention to a certain bit, they might put red in a certain area because it's really bright and intense. So the same goes for anything that you create. If you want to sort of draw the eye around pretty much all of it, then you want to have some things which are continuous so that the eye darts backwards and forwards all over the place. So hence why I'm just putting little blobs of yellow everywhere. And you'll notice this area here is quite empty, so I'm going to bring this out in a minute, and this area down here. So if I put a little yellow blob just here, which is going to denote the sun, just keeps the eye moving around. And if I did the same here, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to just put a different colour in there. I'm just going to make these little raindrops a bit more vivid. And you see how that completely changes everything. If I put some more down here, it changes where your eye goes. So when you're creating page spreads and you're thinking about the colours you want to use and whereabouts you want to use those colours, it's worth thinking about that. It's worth thinking about where the eye is going. Now obviously here in the beginning I wrote sunflowers. That's now kind of disappeared a little bit. So I'm going to go back over it, but I'm going to use a brown now, so that's really going to make this stand out a lot more. Yeah, so it's little bits like that which make a real difference whenever you're doing page spreads. I'm just going to put some little lines here and there. Doesn't have to be anything too specific. As you can see, these are the most random flowers ever. They're not specific. It's just the idea, the impression of flowers, but there's loads of colour and there's various different types of marks here, and there's a little bit of journaling as well. So I'm going to keep doing little sort of phrases and little words here and there. Again, it just draws the eye and really helps you developing, it sort of helps you to develop your journal style as well. Some people like to do, you know, sort of more kind of diary entry style journals, which are beautiful, but some people like to do just sort of bold text here and there of specific words, and they'll build their page around that. Some people like to do sentences or slogans. So everybody's different, and some people just will use it as a diary and they'll just decorate it accordingly to whatever it is they're writing about. So there are all sorts of different styles, and it's about what is sort of unique to you. So there you go. I hope you've enjoyed this virtual session. As always, always happy to bring these to you for Creative Wellness Journey, and hopefully I will see you again soon for another virtual session.